So good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me for this tutorial. So today's tutorial is Skills for Student Success with Augment London. And as mentioned, my name is Barbara Lassie, and I have worked in education for some time in sixth form secondary environments as a humanities teacher and a middle leader. So for today's tutorial, we will explore the Augment London e-learning course in order for us to understand how they teach students to learn, how to think, and how to persuade. We will also, by the end of this session, have gone through some creative and challenging activities to improve students' soft skills. And lastly, explore some opportunities for you to implement the course in your classroom or in your school environment. All right, so sometimes we do hear that a lot of employers identify that there is a gap in student skills once they leave school. And specifically, employers will say that students lack these essential soft skills. So on the board, you can see some examples of these skills that is seen as extremely necessary and crucial for students to be successful in life. Now, when we think about soft skills, touching on those essential critical thinking skills, being able to communicate with fluency, whether that's orally or written, students' ability to speak publicly and engage their audience, students' ability to work well in a team, as well as to demonstrate some independence and leadership. These are things that sometimes aren't always embedded in the formal curriculum, or not enough time is given over to them. And when we think about students being employable after they leave school, or students going on into higher education, these are skills that recruitment officers or potential employers are extremely looking for. When we think about the current pandemic that we're in at the moment, we can see how every day it really is changing education as we know it. And considering a number of countries have moved to online methods of learning, I do think that Augment London as a platform is a very great opportunity for your students to demonstrate really secure digital skills in this age, but also these essential soft skills that future employers are looking for. Okay, so who is Augment London? So you have the website there, and I am going to take you through Augment London's e-learning platform. I'll take you through their objectives in terms of developing specific skills in their students and how the course itself is delivered online. So Augment London offers a comprehensive learning program with an innovative and enriching curriculum to students aged 13 to 18 with a desire to enrich their learning experience. So the online platform is made up of a range of different sessions and modules, engaging online modules that really do help students develop critical and creative thinking skills, because we do want our students to stand out from the crowd. We want them to have skills that other students potentially don't have, but that they can be seen as more desirable and definitely a lot more recruitable. Okay, so when you do access the course online, you will see that it does pretty much look like the two screenshots I have, and I will take you through a live demonstration of the website as well. So what you do need to be aware of is that the course is targeted at students within that age frame. So if you are in the UK, which I am, that will be typically your year 8 up until your sixth form students. So that's a wide range of students that the course is highly accessible for. The course is delivered over a series of 32 weeks, and each week the session will be about 45 minutes to an hour long. You can see in the first image that this is an example of 8 of the modules that is delivered as part of the course. So you can see it's broken up into different weeks, and within that there are a range of videos, so you do have that engaging element, getting students to draw into the lesson itself. And there's a number of activities and assessments that do go alongside with it. At the end of the course as well, your students have an opportunity on completion to be awarded with a certificate, which I will go through later on in the tutorial. Now, Augment London, wanting to fill in that gap, that skills gap when it comes to soft skills, have created a learning course that focuses on 3 key skills. So when I do go through some of the modules that have been placed on the website, you will clearly see how they link into these objectives on this slide. So number 1 is how to learn, teaching students to have an ability for study skills, for memory techniques, being able to recall information and being able to learn. How to think is the second key skill. We always hear people talk about critical thinking skills. Students need to be able, for example, to interpret statistics, provide solutions to problems, think analytically, and really think outside of the box. And what's quite great about Augment London is not only do they deliver engaging courses and different modules that are broken up into lessons, but they also refer to the work of philosophical thinkers, helping students understand how pedagogy and learning has really developed over time. And then lastly, how to persuade. So students are taught, how to speak publicly, speak with fluency, really engage their audience, be able to persuade their audience and negotiate, focusing on things like body language and just overall presentation. So those are the 3 key skills. And when we go through the learning deliveries, you'll be able to see these a bit more clearly. Okay, so in order to access the course then, I did have the website on the screen and I will just show you. Here, I go into augmentlondon.com. Once you sign up, you have this section here. So if I click on course, it takes me to this course page. Now, Augment London is offering a free trial where you can access 8 different weeks of the course delivery itself. So that's what I have on this screen here for you to see. So you can clearly see the layout and the structure. Again, at the top, it goes through those key skills. That's part of the pillars of the platform. So how to learn, how to think, how to persuade. And then we do have some of the modules. So there are 32, but 8 is available part of the free trial. So I'm just going to show you quickly week 1, if we have a look. So this is what it looks like. It's broken down, as I mentioned earlier, into smaller parts. And that's really good because it means that when students are going through it, it's not necessarily 2 hours long, 3 hours long. It's broken up into short, engaging videos. Now, this week in particular is focusing on that skill of how to learn. Specifically, as you can see, the tutor is going to go through how mnemonics, or developing your own mnemonics, can be a very useful tool to help students recall information, even if that information is complex or is large in its form. So what I would do is I will click on this one here. Okay, so you can get a clear idea of the structure when you go inside that lesson itself. So I'm actually in lesson 4, but in lesson 1, typically the presenter or the tutor, he breaks down what mnemonics actually are. So it means that for students who don't have that basic knowledge, will be able to engage with the course. And we know that mnemonics are a really useful way for us to understand information in the forms of perhaps letters, an acronym, ideas, associations, and so forth. So the first lesson is really just a short introduction. The second part of that lesson, the presenter does break down an example of how to use mnemonics that spans from, there's a history element to a maths element. So for example, he uses one about remembering the American states and how they can use a mnemonic to do that. Now, I am going to show you the 4th video, and that is because it shows you how after learning the material, students are given a task or an activity for them to do independently. So they get the knowledge, have the process of how to develop this area, and then they are given the task of actually carrying out.
Welcome back. In this video, you're going to be trying out the techniques that you've learned to remember something yourself by creating your own mnemonic. What you'll see on the screen around me are the first 10 elements of the periodic table. And you're going to be trying to create a mnemonic to remember them. Remember that an effective mnemonic is easy, something that you can remember. It compresses. It takes all that information, the names of those first 10 elements, and transforms them into something much smaller, a single phrase or picture. And finally, that it's vivid. Whatever you come up with needs to be something sufficiently compelling that you remember it. So, I'm going to give you a moment, and your challenge is to come up with your own mnemonic to remember these first 10 elements. Off you go.
So in that lesson, we were able to see how students can use the tool of mnemonics in order for them to retain really important information. The first 3 lessons, the tutor goes through what mnemonics actually are and gives ideas of how students can develop their own. And then in that last one that we saw the clip of, gave them an actual task. So thinking about giving ownership to your students and how you can potentially support them when they are engaging with the online tool, I came up with an example of how I would use that with my students. So I primarily teach sociology, and one of the more complex topics that we look at is the sociology of divorce. And students can sometimes find it very difficult to remember, as well as understand the different explanations that exist for them to use that in their exams. So for example, if we want to explain why there's been an increase in divorce in the UK, these are the sociological explanations that you can see on the left-hand side. Now, trying to remember stigma, rise in expectations of women, changes in the law, financial independence of women, and the rise of secularization can be very difficult for them to do. However, utilizing the skill that was demonstrated in the online platform regarding mnemonics, my students can now condense this information into an easier format. It's a lot more compressed, and then using visualization helps bring it to memory. So if you can see in the red, we do have a mnemonic that's created with an acronym. So for students to remember the word selves, even though it is spelled differently, it's still a vivid image that they will have in their mind to recall that information. They can confidently be able to recall why there has been a rise of divorce in the UK. So I would, to reinforce this, remind them that today people make the decision to get a divorce for themselves. That themselves and the latter part of that word brings to memory the mnemonic. So even though the students are given their own tasks to do, so as you saw, it was for them to remember the first 10 elements of the periodic table, which is a very difficult thing to do. However, with this skill, it's a lot more accessible. You can also, as an educator, get your students to think outside of that. So any area within one of their subjects, or perhaps your subject, that they are finding quite challenging, you could give them this tool and get them to respond in turn. Lovely. Okay, so as you can see, this is the course section that I showed you. I showed you one clip, but because there is actually, as I mentioned, a free trial going on, you can examine the range of weeks that there are on the platform and go through the different lessons independently. I just wanted to pick out a few just to support you. So remember, one of the pillars was how to learn, and we've just looked at an example of what that lesson might look like. Another pillar is how to think. So I'm going to show you week 4, and as you can see on the screen, week 4 helps students go through the lesson of survivorship bias. Within this segment, this is all about developing those critical thinking skills, helping students move from asking those what questions to the how and the why, helping them understand the big ideas and avoiding particular traps, cognitive traps, that help them misinterpret information. So similar to the previous section, which was week 1, you can see that it's broken down into 4 parts. So you have the introduction. The second lesson is what is it? So that goes through the theory. The third lesson is selection bias, and there will be examples given to students to help them understand. And then that task of try it yourself, where students will go off independently and respond. And I'll show you how they actually bring that information back to the tutors at Augment London. So just looking at this, thinking about survivorship bias, the presenter goes through helping students understand how they can, helping students understand how sometimes they might misinterpret or misunderstand evidence only by looking at what actually survives. And I do think that this lesson in particular, or just the skill of thinking, is very important in this time. When we think about what's going on around us, there are opportunities for you to draw real life examples or real life experiences for students to connect this course with their surroundings. So an example that I would use with my students would be for them to think about the current situation and for them to answer the question, what problems are there with comparing the COVID-19 death rates between countries? So the topic on survivorship bias really taps into making students understand how they can avoid cognitive traps and how they can understand information by assessing whether it's reliable or the evidence provided is actually truthful, and doing that through being extremely critical. So just looking at this screen here, we are bombarded by data, pictures, news stories, even on our WhatsApps perhaps, or our forms of text communication, stories and articles all about the death rates globally. And it can be very difficult for students to be able to interpret those by misunderstanding the information that's in front of them. So what I did was I wanted my students to think about how can we critique the idea that globally everybody is recording their statistics of COVID-related deaths in the same way. So by students examining data, they can start to think about things such as, well, some countries ignore death figures of those who died outside of hospital environments. So someone who passed away in a care home, specifically earlier on in the UK, wasn't recorded as part of that overall country's counts of deaths by COVID-19. So then that gives us a misconstrued understanding of the real level or the real rate of the virus globally, or perhaps thinking about different demographics within countries. Some countries will have an older population, and that elderly population might not be counted if they died from if they died not as a result of COVID-19, even though they were identified as positive, but as something else. So there's an opportunity there for you to really get your students to think about how they engage with the media, how they engage with data, and whether or not they truly are able to make critical thinking decisions when it comes to formulating ideas. Okay, so that is just a brief breakdown of some of the skills that will be explored within the course itself. However, you do need to know how students access and how they engage in terms of creating feedback itself. So if I do show you on this screen, when you go to the course section, there is a taskbar where you can access your profile as a student, the discussion forum, and you can also make contact with the team if you wish to do so. The discussion forum is where at the end of the different modules, when students are given that task, they have an opportunity to engage in these breakout sessions here. And going back to some of those soft skills regarding collaboration and teamwork, that's really important for students to make sure that they are giving or they are inputting their ideas and some of their thoughts in this group here. So that's where they will do this. So you can see it's an online tool. All the engagement takes place through this medium rather than through a physical space itself. After doing the lessons, there are assessments. So there are two forms of assessments that are offered through Augment London's online platform. And the first one is formative forms of assessment. So to ensure that there is some form of monitoring students' progress throughout the weeks, Augment London has constructed a formative assessment outline. So we can see here, just looking at this marking criteria, this is how your students will be assessed once they are part of the course. Now, I want to highlight that the criteria, as you can see on the left-hand side, identify different areas. So students' abilities to respond to prompts, students' abilities to engage or reply with other students, the language that they are communicating with, evidence that they've applied as part of their task contributions, and then timeliness. So these are all important areas, and I'm going to touch on three just to show you how they do go back to that first slide we looked at in terms of this skills gap that exists amongst our young people once they finish school. So looking at this matrix here, for 2 points in response to prompt, it says attempted adequate response, but may have missed main ideas or wandered off from the topic. So at the end of the courses, as I showed you, that fourth lesson will give students a task to go off and do independently or perhaps in their groups. Once they've completed that task, they would upload it to that group discussion section or the discussion board as I showed you. However, if you can see that the student has not understood the task, then that's a clear identicator that they haven't understood. So perhaps that gives the tutor an opportunity to engage with that and offer some feedback. We've got, when it comes to replying with to other students, clear engagement is awarded the highest points. So going back to those collaboration and team skills, they are assessed in that area. And then another one just to show you is when we look at the lower end of timeliness, it is identified if students aren't posting their responses, aren't completing the tasks, or have entered their tasks very late. And that also gives whether you as a teacher or the tutors themselves an opportunity to see that perhaps the student is struggling with time management, or you can try and find out why they haven't engaged with the tool. So it's really useful that your students aren't just engaging with no one on the other end. There is a dedicated team that's in charge of marking or assessing their work using the formative structure throughout the weeks. But there is also summative assessment. So you would, of course, want to see or to know how well they've done or progressed over time, not just those short-term stages, but the long-term goal as well. So having a look at this grid here, we can see how students are assessed on the knowledge that they've retained over a period of time. Students will be assessed using this grade. So we've got from A to C, and we have these percentages that you can have a look. What I will show you is when it comes to doing the summative assessments, students now have an opportunity to do something that develops those higher order skills. So largely this will focus on the how to persuade and the how to think unit, not the how to learn unit. And students will have a decision of whether they want to create a video recording or they want to write an essay, and that essay is up to 1,000 words. So these are a lot more complex, or this is a much more complex form of assessment that will be able to assess how they've done over time. So when students do this, they will then again use their area. Okay, there we go. So this is where they will be able to upload their works. They can upload their video or they can upload their essay. Okay, so again, going back to that online engagement where it will be received by the Augment London team. Lovely. Okay, so a couple of facts just to round that part of the course off, or this part of the tutorial. So 8 lessons from the course, as I showed you, is available for a free trial. And Augment London is open to offering an annual license to schools for the course. So what I will do in the next part of this tutorial is show you ways in which you can deliver it in your school settings. And the course is also fully accredited by NCFE. So this is quite useful because not only do you have the formative and summative assessments, you also have an official record or certification to show that your students have completed the course successfully. For our students who are of an older age, it's very useful for them in particular to put it in their CV to demonstrate that they have, outside of their timetabled lessons, engaged with a rigorous course to develop skills that are necessary for their future goals. And then for the younger students, it's also useful for them to put it in their National Record of Achievement files. So it's quite nice that the NCFE has accredited this course as well. Now, thinking about opportunities, so how could you deliver Augment London's e-learning course to your students? Now, given, well, firstly, thank you very much for filling out the questionnaire. And I could see that those who are joining live and those who will join later, you teach a wide range of students, which is great. And we're probably all in different positions in terms of how we might be able to deliver it within our capacity. When we think about school-based environments, I am very much aware that sometimes the formal timetable, so the curriculum that you deliver as a subject leader, you probably don't have enough time for you to deliver Augment London alongside your normal lessons. So a great opportunity would be to do this within form times, or sometimes they might be called registration periods. So those periods where your students are in a group in the mornings or in the afternoons, once a week, it's a useful opportunity for them collectively to go through the platform itself. It's also useful if you have your form periods with vertical groups, because as we know, the age offering is from 13 to 18 years of age. So your students in year 8 up until 6th form can still all access and all engage regardless of their ability or which year group they're in. And of course, as I mentioned, it's not taxing on you as a teacher to facilitate it. So because currently not everybody is in a school environment, and perhaps in the new academic year won't be immediately, you could also deliver it in a remote environment. So of course it is an e-learning platform. It just relies on your students having signed up and your students logging in, so they can do this in their own time. And given that we are pretty much all going on summer break, I know there might be concerns as to whether or not your students will be in good study habits when they return to school in the fall. So this could be used as a summer catch-up session, a way in which you can make sure that there is still a structured form of learning taking place outside over the next 6 weeks, maybe it's 8 weeks in your circumstance. and for them to establish good study habits before they return to school. So bring a bit of normalcy as well as routine to their current structure over the summer break. And because we do have Augment London has provided a way for students to upload their work, to communicate within the discussion groups itself. It won't require you as a teacher to engage with it at that time. Because it is 32 weeks, it's also useful because when they do return to school after that period of break, they can still engage with it and still complete it once they resume school. Okay, and then thinking about another way you might want to deliver this is through private study. Some of the schools that I've worked in, especially the students who are of an older age, so I'm thinking students who are in sixth form or perhaps college, they will have some non-contact time. So they will have some periods where they aren't in formal lessons with a teacher. During those independent or private study periods, this is a great way for students to do something productive, for students to focus on their soft skills after having, of course, been through the formal curriculum, catching up with coursework and so forth. So we don't want them to neglect developing those soft skills. And this could be a way for you as an educator, as a course facilitator, to provide this offering to your students. So you could run it in a way where whichever period it is they have on their timetable, they can use that slot to engage with that 45 to an hour minute lesson itself. And of course, thinking about collaborative learning, if they're in a school environment, then it's a useful way for them to talk about the tasks that they've been given, to come up with new ideas, and then of course upload that in the group discussion forums. Just wanted to show you the structure again so you can clearly see what it will look like if you go through the free trial. So you can see that we have the 8 weeks available of the 32, and that each one is broken up into the different lessons. Now, your students can also see how far they've got along with the course. So if you can see on my top, it says 13% completed. You've got the total modules, which is 8, and the completed modules, which is 1. So they can also monitor their progress and see whether or not they are on track and whether they have completed their tasks. I also would like to just remind you that you have the discussion forum where students will upload responses to the task given at the end of each lesson, and then we have here where they will upload their work as well. Okay, so that is the Augment London website. You can go through this if you sign up for a free trial, which is excellent because you do have a full 8 weeks for you to go through a range of different materials and be able to assess how they demonstrate those skills of how to learn, how to think, and how to persuade. Okay, right, that's lovely. So thank you so much for joining. I do just want to highlight one more thing. When it comes to the platform itself, what I would say is very unique about it is the fact that it does cover a wide range of ages. I think that's really useful because regardless of what stage your students are at in terms of those skills, there's always an opportunity for them to engage with the platform itself. The examples that are used in the lessons are also extremely broad, so it does reach out to a range of different interests. So being a sociology subject lead, it's not just for my course, it also applies for students who are studying maths, students who are studying science, English, and so forth, because the examples are based across the curriculum. So it doesn't matter what age or what stage your students are at, it is an accessible and, of course, buildable course. But thank you for taking the time. I hope you've learned something very useful, and I appreciate your efforts.